Hello everyone and welcome back to class. It's nice to see everyone here today. Today we're going to be continuing our look into Google Sheets, focusing mostly on formulas. There's a couple other things I want to show you guys today. So without further ado, let's get started. First thing I want to show you guys before we get into all the deep work today is the ability to freeze panes. One of the things you hear teachers complain about sometimes is if you scroll down, you suddenly lose like your header row if you had one. And I understand the annoyance of that because it's like, well, you scroll down at some point, you forget what the column is. Then you have to scroll up and then scroll back down. You're able to freeze these columns, and I always like to use it using these two bars over here on the side. So if you look above the row 1 and to the left of column A, you'll see these two slightly thicker bars. If you click mouse over them, you'll see that they get highlighted in a light shade of blue. You can take those and you can drag them, and what they'll do is they'll change a freeze line, which means anything above or to the left of that line doesn't disappear when you scroll. It stays visible. So you see if I scroll down, I can still see all my headers. I don't have enough columns to my right at the moment in time, but if I took this bar here and dragged it off to the right, I would get the same effect. And then you can always just drag it back. I like to let people know about that. It's helpful, handy. A lot of people don't realize you can do it, so knowing about it just makes you that much stronger and makes this less intimidating as we go. The big thing I want to focus on today, though, are formulas, or functions, rather. And what they are, they're exactly like they sound. It's the same thing where you'd see in math or science class. It's a way to do a calculation of some sort. There are tons of them. I'm not going to get into all of them. We don't have that kind of time. And honestly, I don't know them all. I only know the ones I generally need to use. But I'm going to show a couple to you guys. We're going to start with the basics, and we're going to put in a separate video to do a couple of the more advanced ones that can be helpful. So today, let's take a dive into it. Now, a couple rules for formulas. The first rule of formulas, all formulas have to start with an equal sign. Basically, putting in that equal sign tells Google Sheets, hey, this is a formula, this is a function, this is something I want you to do for me. After that, you're pretty much able to do what you want. If you want to type in numbers, you can do that. If you want to do mathematical operations, add, subtract, multiply, divide, you just have to put in the appropriate symbol. Adding and subtracting doesn't change. It's a plus sign or a minus sign. If you want to multiply, you're going to need to use the asterisk. And if you want to divide, you need to use a slash. But once you have those in there, most people know them by default. That's why I'm not going to go too far into it. But let's say I want to take this number and multiply it by, I don't know, 2,948. I can hit enter. And you'll see it does this calculation for me. If we take a look up here at our top formula bar, you can actually see what the formula was I entered. Which means if I need to go back and change it, I can change it up here in the formula bar. I meant that to be a 5. Or I can double click into the cell, and that's actually supposed to be a 0.87. And it'll make the necessary adjustments for me. I don't need to do all that work. I need to redo my work by hand. What's also to a degree nice about these formulas, is that if I, let's say, inserted something to the left here, which is fine, let's say I want to add these two numbers together. I know it doesn't make sense to do that in this scenario with what they're representing, but we're going to let that slide for right now. I can do equals, and instead of typing in a value, I can click on a cell, then enter the operation I want, and then click on the next cell. So you see here it's saying D14 plus E14. And it adds those two numbers together. I theoretically want to add all of these rows. Now I could go equals plus equals plus number. But you and I both know I'm going to be here forever. What you can do, though, is when you have a formula like this, where you're using a cell reference, if you take a look at the bottom right corner, you'll see that there is a little blue box on your highlighted cell. When you mouse over it, your cursor changes from its normal pointer design to the skinny plus sign. If you click that and you drag, it will autofill any direction you draw, which will in turn cause these values to change. You'll see 23, 21, 20, 19, 18. So I'm able to do 100 problems in no time, essentially, which I think is very important for people to understand. I think it's very important for kids to be able to utilize that as well. I know some of you math teachers thinking, no, they need to be able to follow the steps and do the formula and all the other things. And I'm going to say, okay, I understand and I agree. But I also feel that if a student can write the formula down and program it essentially into a computer, that also shows a level of mastery. They understand how it works. They understand how to tell a computer to do it. They're able to explain to something else how to follow the formula, which generally means you know it more often than not. Even if you don't, the fact that if you can still program it correctly, I think that shows a fair level of mastery. But that is just my opinion. It's one of the reasons why I'm at war with math departments sometimes. And you're saying this is great for adding and subtracting, but let's be real here. No one cares about adding and subtracting. That's more or less pretty easy. Multiplying, dividing, same thing. Okay, fine. What if we want to do an average? And you want the kids to do an average in class? Well, they could take all the numbers, they can add them all up, they can hit divide, and they can answer, and then count how many numbers they add together and divide by that number. And it's great when you're doing like 5, 10, 15 numbers maybe. But in this case, I've got 34 numbers, and they all have decimal points. I want to know what my average miles per gallon is for the year. Well, fortunately, if I come up here to my little sum button, or I always call it the sum button, I think it's an epsilon or a sigma. It says functions. And if I hit the drop arrow, I'll see that these are all the functions that are preloaded into it. Here are all of your functions. Go ahead, scan through them. I don't have time for that. But you'll notice one of the common ones they give you is average. So you hit average. And it gives you a little box that says equals average, because now we're using a function, not a straight formula. And basically what you need to do is you need to select the value or range of values that you want to get the average for. So in this case, I want to get all of these averaged. So you see it tells me it's saying E2 through E34. I hit enter. There's my average. I just averaged 34 numbers in a few seconds. A lot more efficient, I think, than counting and dividing. You'll also notice that there's a count function, which means it'll count the number of values in something. So let's say I want to know how many, things did I run? How many, times did I check my gas? I can do a count. I can select the cells I need. I hit enter, and I can see that there were 33 entries. It also does the min and max, so if you were trying to identify a min and max and mix the numbers, same thing. It's incredibly helpful. One other one, though, I want to show because it's not shown here. It's not one of the default ones, but I feel it's important to identify, is the square root, which is sqrt is the command. So you can just do sqrt, or you can click on it, and then you just choose the value that you want the square root of, and it will calculate it for you. Not critical, but there are formulas that do require square roots at points, so it's important to know how to do this. Also, in case you're wondering, how do you square a value? Let's say I want to do the square of 5. You're going to use the up caret, which is shift 6, and then you just say what value is your exponent after that. So in this case, I do 2, and it's 25. I can change it to 3, 125, etc., etc., etc. Fun things to know, helpful things to know about that in regards to formulas. And those are your basic formulas. Those are your basic functions. I'm going to end this video here. We're going to come back and we're going to do another one going into some more advanced formulas, some more advanced functions that I feel are going to be helpful more than anything else. But until then, everybody, class dismissed.